Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. We had a perfect timing in our bottleneck because we decided to build something just before COVID hit and then had to sit around and wait for the customers to come to us because we couldn't go to see them. And as you can see from the hair, pretty old, been around here for quite a while, and we kept coming up with the same thing: is why is life so difficult? Why does it take so long? And why does it cost so much? So we just went about trying to solve those three boxes, join them up, find what the net cause of it. The net cause of that is what we were about. But we decided we're not going to take our word for it. Let's see what the industry said. So the industry add on to that. So quick show of hands, because we've had some show of hands already. So I just want to see the audience go with that. How many people have been lucky enough to go to the AWS Media Symposium that happened just a few weeks ago? A few of you, that's good. How about the DPP Leaders Summit? Good. How about reading the DPP and vendor white papers and authority things and things like that? Yeah, that's what I kind of thought. So what we decided to do, Mike, who's sitting down here, is going to help me run through onto that. We're going to just summarise all of that such that it's easy to go with that. So we came up and looking through all the various documents, and we're going to refer to those as we run through this very quickly onto those. Some of them are old chestnuts that every time, if you're like me, you go to all these symposiums, you hear the same stories over and over and over and over again. So I'm not going to bore you with some of those. But there's some interesting ones that have come up most recently. There's the RFP process, in my words, broken, in their words, and needs reimagining. There's some flexible pricing, the word pricing always comes on up, but there's an interesting connotation that goes with those. Microservices, you've talked in this forum before, and so on and so forth. So we've just taken some of those topics and just want to roll through those over the next few slides and just see where it came to the conclusion that we've done, and see if you agree with us. And if we do, then we can go down the pub and we'll have a conversation on a sales pitch. But if you don't deal with that. So the first thing is, Mike's going to just pick you up on this bit.
Thank you, Greg. Hello, everyone. So, kicking off with a nice simple subject about system integration, just looking at that side of it. Used to be what we all called lifting and shifting, if you remember. And in terms of our memories, it's worth pointing out that 3 years ago, the world was a very different place. We hadn't got fearful of situations like this, and we're only just coming back to situations like this. The world of cloud was pretty much unknown within the industry, and certainly very untrusted. It's still much safer, people thought, to bike a tape across town than put it anywhere up in a cloud or something like that. And yet suddenly overnight, what I noticed was behind Hugh Edwards on the 10 o'clock news, you went from people everywhere to no one. And suddenly the industry had discovered the cloud. It was all great. They're all remote working and it's all sorted. So let's just take a step back beyond that to when systems started being put together. They were probably all hardware systems in those days, and you could connect one bit to another bit and it probably all worked. And then someone came up with the bright idea of using software in the broadcast industry. And then we thought it was a great idea if we built the software to do exactly what we wanted. And so we ended up with custom software. And that's where it all started to go wrong, really, because suddenly we realized that that wasn't quite so straightforward. So we spent a number of years evolving that, and we pretty much pretended amongst ourselves that we were making it better. So we talked about configuration rather than customization. And we talked about interfacing, and we came up with XMLs and JSON files and stuff like that. And if we could do those, then suddenly there wasn't a problem anymore. But actually, it wasn't like that at all. It was always rubbish. It was always slow and expensive. It was always very specific to what people wanted, and it was very, very hard to support. And then the world changed slightly. This thing appeared, the cloud, the way it was architected, the way it was built, and suddenly people came up with different ways of deploying stuff and different ways of paying for it. And what that meant was there was a different world out there, and we could operate differently in the different world. And I think that's the key point that we want to make tonight, is that the world has changed and we need to change the way we deal with it. And if we do that, we will all win. And if we don't, we will still have problems, just the same as with custom software. So system integration, we're still doing system integration. People still want systems, but their attitudes have changed. We're all used to this world now, aren't we? We need something, we go out, we get it, we download it. If we like it, we pay for it. If not, we cancel a subscription and off we go again. So it's a completely different attitude. We're not really prepared to sit around for 2 years and wait and see if something's going to work and then tweak it. So actually now when I start to engage with someone who's going to put together a solution for what I want, I actually want to sit down and discuss with them and look at different products and think about how I'm going to deploy them and how I'm going to use them. And as I discover them, I don't want to write it down in a document which I'm then going to send out and wait 6 months for someone to reply to. I want to see them working, see if they fit, and evolve my requirements and build it up as I go along. And I want to be able to tweak that, and I want to be able to tweak it. I don't want to be going off to some development team for 10 weeks. I want to go in, change something, see if it's had the right effect, and see where it goes. So system integration is still a necessity, but it's something now that's a living process. It lives as you evolve your system. It's not something that you request and wait for it to be delivered. That's completely changed now. Another big change is obviously the architecture we're now using. We now have tools that sit out there, they pay for differently, they're deployed differently, and therefore they affect what we're doing differently. A number of the big tech changes within our industry have been brought about for things that affect the consumer. So going digital, going high definition, going 4K or whatever. And it's given people the excuse to be able to start again. Clean sheet of paper, wipe the slate clean, let's start again. Now the cloud and everything that brings with it is a change in architecture. It's not a start again process. So for most customers out there, they haven't got the luxury of being able to start again. And probably one of the first big mistakes that was made when people started dabbling with the cloud was that thought that that's it, off we go, we'll do it completely differently. It's not like that at all. It's an evolution. I've got stuff that still works. I've got stuff that hasn't end of life yet. I've got stuff that I'm still paying for. So actually, to be effective, I need to build a bridge between the old and new. I need to be able to use both things together. That's the practical reality of running a business. I can't just throw it away and start again. So when we hear people talk about needing hybrid architectures now, there's lots of trendy phrases that are bandied about. It's pretty much a necessity because most people are going to want to run old and new together. And to do that, I like the word seamless. We need to work them together seamlessly. Old and new need to work together. That needs to be built in. That's a given. And so whatever technical solution we come up with, enterprise buses, microservices, whatever they are, they need to work across both. They need to work across cloud and on-prem. So often on-prem is added as an extra. Oh, we also do on-prem. It's one and the same. You need your business to be seamless. Greg.
There we go. Thank you very much, Mike. So we go to the next little thing now. This is a little quiz here. All right. There is a prize very similar to the 200th subscriber. If anybody can name what all the strap lines are of all the little cartoons that come around to that. So I've given you a hint on the first one. No complaining. So moving on to buying a reality. So the Buy Better paper that came one out there, it has a whole load of the existing ones that came onto that, but there are a couple that came one up, and the first one, as I intimated earlier on, is RFP process is broken. It goes on onto that. Now what they really mean by that in my world is RFPs are a dream. You know, I'm old enough to remember the first time we did a all server based TV station in the world. All right, nobody had ever done it before. So how can they write an RFP about how they're going to go about doing it? They couldn't, because we learned on the job. All right, and then when you go on to the next one, you're surprised that a customer who's never done it before has written a specification of how he wants it done, and you go around, well, haven't you asked me how to do it or what the lessons learnt from the previous project? So there's not. So we think it's much better in a more of a partnership type of a way rather than RFP. It's better to have conversations to go around onto that. It's better to engage early before you've set your thoughts in down a particular path that goes onto that. Now, of course, vendors are always talking honestly, just like Boris Johnson does. So that's onto that. But you know, it's the detail that's moving on to that. And we're great believers in buy what you can touch, feel, use, rather than a specification of something that may or may not happen in the future, may or may not have been able to be designed, may or may not be able to become a reality. So in the end of that, we want to deliver something much quicker. So the next one that is onto that is we came on up there is the ecosystem of clouds and so on. Is all about the bell curve, and what they really mean by that, I think, is less customization, much more productization. I was really pleased to hear early on in the conversations there were new specifications for productization and alike. But that doesn't need to remove the flexibility that moves around onto there. So let's just see how that one sort of pans out there. People want change the workflows, create workflows. They always want to have the best of breed tools. Nobody wants to have second best that moves around onto that. And they really want just the functionality that they want. So I find a lot of people end up wanting to build their own purely because they don't want a bloated product with lots of other things that are weighting it down without getting all the benefits to move on. So we think is better is by far less. The next one came on up there is that good old cost. Cost. I'm on the vendor side, always been on the vendor side, unlike my colleagues, and so on and that. So the first thing anybody opens up when they open their mouth, I need it cheaper. What do they really mean by that? Well, I think they really mean is they want flexible pricing for the tools that they want to buy. And what's increasingly in the 10 years that I've been selling cloud type based solutions is people want to pay for the functionality they need. They're quite happy to pay a fair price for the functionality that they use. They don't want to pay for functionality they don't use. So that often comes around to go on to those. And of course, you know, you can see in our title, we believe in SaaS. SaaS doesn't fit everywhere. What a lot of people want is predictability in costs, and sometimes that doesn't happen. Here's your second cartoon. Who's onto that? Oh, and you said take that things off. Is that me next?
There's always one, isn't there?
There's always one. It's usually me. It's onto that.
Thank you. So I don't know if anyone's a reader of the Broadcast Bridge, but Tony came up with a great summary of the situation, which we filtered down to 3 sentences, actually. Thank you, Tony. Monolithic software designs are rapidly disappearing into the history books. Big, heavy lumps of code really aren't the future. But as he rightly points out, just picking it up, just lifting and shifting it up into the cloud isn't the way to go. And I think there's a lot of evidence of what's gone on over the last few years of COVID, where people have done that, ticked the box, said that's it, we've deployed to the cloud, and then suddenly realised that it's not quite working the way they thought it would, or should, more to the point. And what Tony comes to the conclusion of is that it's not just a change of approach to infrastructure design, but also a development of mindsets. And I think that's the key thing in all of this, is to remember we're going to a new world, new architectures, new tools. It's not just servers in a different room, it's a completely different approach. And that's the key thing that needs to be taken into account from the beginning to the end of the design. And that's where you get your wins. And then this old chestnut, this suddenly popped up at the leaders' briefing again this year. I don't think we've heard about metadata for about 15 years, have we? And then suddenly it was important again. I suspect part of that is because people have suddenly remembered how important it is and how useful it is. And one of the things that's happened is people are wanting to make more money out of their content, and to do that, they've decided they'd like to localize it. They'd like to show it in lots of different places, on lots of different platforms, and charge in lots of different currencies. And of course, to do that and to make it interesting to a viewer, there's a lot they have to do to it. And so that means going back and looking at the metadata to work out how they can localize. And it's very interesting, I find, that we get terribly excited these days about artificial intelligence, but actually there's some real-world intelligence there as well, because there's silly little things like scripts, which are a fundamental part of an awful lot of productions, which, if they were stored sensibly and could be easily retrieved, it would be very easy to do a translation and dub into a different language, whereas a lot of people seem very excited with the fact we can use AI and speech to text it and spend an awful lot of money to get an 80% accurate product. So there's lots of ways we can be clever about this without needing to dive into technology. But what's key is that everything we create to do with the production can be found somewhere. If we can do that, then potentially it has use. And if we've got that unique ID, it doesn't really matter where it is, we can go away and find it. But what it does mean is that searching across systems, federating searching, is becoming more and more important, because no longer can we expect everything just to be in one place.
Thank you. That was all right. So, can't get anybody to complain here in this room. Go cloud. Goes on to that. But we hear this word native, and as Paul did when he first started up, it was onto that. Well, what is the real definition to go around onto those? As Mike had already said, COVID had forced people to start to use the cloud because they had no choice. So in my book, the naysayers that says that cloud was never fit for purpose suddenly had to eat their own words and go and deliver onto that. But the problem I have is really the next piece onto that. They just lifted and shifted, as Mike had said, and away it goes. Now, to me, for those who are old as I am, will remember the time when we went from that thing called tapes and we went to this thing called files. And the equivalent of doing what they did there is the equivalent of putting your content off the tape onto a USB stick, but still putting the USB stick on the back of a motorbike to take it to the next production company, right? You're not using the best of the technology that it's all about. So you really got to understand the technology you've got, where the benefits are, and move forward onto that. So whether we call it cloud native, whatever we want to actually call it onto that, what you're really talking about is let's build an architecture that gets the benefit of the technology that it's designed to be done. Goes on to that. Now, we stole a couple of pictures because we sat in the audience and took those. Now, I'm particularly interested in this because I've been talking with Sky through their journey of their cloud over the number of years. And let's be fair to say, we had slightly different opinions at the beginning of this path. And the last time I talked to them, which was actually before this was all done onto those, they were very close to very similar type of conclusions, because we'd learnt years ago, and they've gone through the process and learnt it now, and learnt the things that they didn't know about before. So I'm quite interested in some of those. So the cloud native thing, whatever they mean, is no, let's use the technology where technology really is of value. Monoliths has done, we've all talked about this onto those, interoperability, because he wants to be able to choose whatever technology he wants to fit onto that. So that's fine. We just need to find a way of enabling that in a very efficient kind of way. Cost is always coming back up there again, but it's pay for what you're using, allow me to change my mind and move forward to go with those. So I quite like that one because it kind of summarizes up for me quite a lot of the other slides. And of course, clouds at scale, skies at scale. If you don't adopt it, move on forward. So what's our view of the future? We've got just a couple of slides and we're done. So it's close to the last of the beers. We're ahead of time like that. So of course, we're saying don't ignore on-prem. It's not a cloud-only strategy out there. It's a migration or a combination of to go with that. There's this thing called cloud. Is it native cloud? Is it somebody else's data center, which we're going to call a cloud? What do we mean by that? For me, it's somebody else's data center. It's either somebody else's data center using somebody else's infrastructure, somebody else's platform, somebody else worrying about the resilience, somebody else worrying about redundancy and the like, or I'm doing all of that but just not paying for the hardware. We can have that as a debate over the beers to go with that. But we believe you need to connect those all together with you've used the word agile. I thought agile was getting a bit like media supply chain. You know, everybody uses it too much these days. Push on to that. But we think you need a secure messaging bus that can move the essence, move the data, move the information, move the metadata, do the searching that goes around onto those, and then make those connections using the microservices, because those microservices can come from multiple places. Going to be the interfaces into those third-party older technologies or the newer technologies that move together. And then I want to choose from a library of tools which tools I want to deploy today. And I want to change my mind that tomorrow I want to do a different set of tools, and I want the flexible pricing to allow me to go deal with that. So we believe a library of tools, fast deployment onto a message bus that moves around onto that, with either predictable costs, fixed costs for your year, or pay for what pay and then use goes onto that, is probably the kind of models that move on forwards. Paul asked us to give a quick example. We can't tell you which the customer is. Those who might be smart enough in the room. We did one in Asia so that it'd be a little harder for you as a group to decide who this customer is. So onto that. But this coined up, we were talking with Paul, this coined up the 2 years to a disappointment. I mean, how many times have you spent 2 years in a major project only to get to the end and you never met the original objectives, whether they're business or the technology to go with that? This customer had done that. He'd gone through the traditional process of thinking up the requirements, writing an RFP, seeing the nice demos, which we're all very good at, doing demoing vaporware, moving through discussions, getting around to that, then trying to fix things, and it still didn't do quite what we wanted. So we went and we decided, isn't there not a better approach? So we came on in there, we had a discussion first. What are you actually trying to do, Mr. Customer, blah, blah, blah. And I won't go into the details about the multiple fees that are going on onto those. And we went, well, have you not thought of having a mixed technology solution? Just bolt on some extra bits onto the existing infrastructure, try it and see it. So they went through, did that. We found it didn't quite work the first time around. We've been around a couple of times onto that. But we got to the end result of success or failure far, far quicker. So for us, okay, you never know what you want to do at the start. So the agile conversation, I'm not an engineer for doing the agiles onto that, but you never know everything that's onto that. That's pretty well the same onto that. We're saying it doesn't need to be difficult. You know, let's evolve it as we move along. Let's not try and guess everything right at the very beginning that goes onto that. It doesn't need to take that long, okay? Its importance is the end result, the outcome, if you're a business manager like that, not the journey. And then finally, it doesn't have to cost that much, honest. Our fees are very modest. Where's on to that? Where's on to that? Thank you. Catch you in a bit.
So, we've probably got time for a couple of questions. Go on, someone ask some snarky question, please.
So, how in this model that you're talking about, how do you, especially if you're a service provider where you're buying a bunch of stuff and you're selling it on a certain price, and you know everyone wants something for less, and all the vendors want something for more. How do you, in that model, get the price that means that you got a good market price? If you don't want to go down the RFP route, the hard-nosed RFP route.
Oh, you mean how do you know you got the most competitive price?
Because you're trying to build a sustainable business, aren't you?
Yep.
Yep. You know.
You know, let me twist that around. Okay. Let me tell you a story from 1,000 years ago, but it taught me a lesson. Okay. That what is the price? All right. And I'll tell you because the boss, the person I sold this to, knows I go around and tell everybody about this story. So I think it's okay to do it in a public forum. We won, previous company, we won the biggest contract the company had ever had, okay, which was to build the new automation system for News 24 and worldwide, and it to take the gallery staff down from 15 on a shift to 3 or maybe 2 overnight. Okay, it was 2.5 million. It's the biggest contract we ever done. We were absolutely fantastic. We thought it was the best thing we'd ever done. We went right the way through. It was painful. You can look back in history. We wouldn't quite made on air on the day we made it on air. There's a whole load of lessons we could spend a lot of other time on that, because we sold something that we hadn't got. But we got there in the end. I went to go see the big boss, Tom Ragg, head of news at the BBC, right at the end of the project. Now, you only get taken up to see the headmaster's office, when you've been a naughty boy, right? So up I went and I went to go see him. And he said to me, thank you very much, Greg, for all the efforts and the like. He said to me, do you know how much you saved me? And I went, no, because I thought I did a bottoms up pricing of the things. 2.5 million, best thing I've ever done, beat all the competition, absolutely fantastic. He turned around to me and says, you saved me 11.5 million a year in operational costs. So I answer to the question is, you turn it all around in the partnership way of dealing with that. You turn around and you say, the price is actually what the business can work with. And if you're both honest with each other, you can work it onto that.
That's a really good answer. That's a really good answer.
Paul. You've lost your clicker, you lost your microphone.
One more. Someone else. No?
So at the beginning of the presentation, talking about what the customer wants, which was more around less customized specific software, more inside the bell curve of what you can already offer. But actually in your end example, it looked more like you were going back to the design me something custom, please, to do the exact job that I want done.
So, yeah, you're right. Okay, the difference here, and we try not to do the sales pitch, the difference there is if you solve your unique requirements through configuration of a flexible platform as opposed to writing dedicated code, okay, you can solve both.
And yeah, one more over here, and then we're.
Do you think that approach can be used even if your customer has presented an RFP?
You know, the interesting thing for me is increasingly the conversations I'm having with not the procurement departments who are still stuck down, that's the best way to get the best competitive price, but the people who are responsible for delivering success. And they've begun to realise, particularly when you're going for a transition to a world you don't know, then trying to guess everything up front and writing it doesn't work. You know, the conversations we're having with major international broadcasters today at yours and your media bosses, I guess, levels, not procurement is what I really meant onto that, is they all start to go, this is the only way we're going to get where we need to be to go onto that. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying we're ready to engage in that particular way. Others are doing onto that. And what's most importantly, the people who are now responsible for doing it don't want 2 years to find a failure. And therefore they're saying there has to be a better way. And the reason why we did it this way around is because for us, we made that decision 4 or 5 years ago, okay? The industry in the last 6 months is now starting to say we're woken up and saying the same thing. So I think we're all on the same page. And I think there was a strap line on there that says somebody fix procurement, because I think that's the end problem, but it's a different problem to the one in this room.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Greg and Mike.
Thank you for your time.
And of course, thank you very much to Simon for his earlier talk as well. Hey. And we'll see you on April 26th. Thank you very much for coming. Great to see you.